Hello, my name is Sam Felton and welcome to Expert Interviews here on Smash the Fat. With us today is somebody who's been on the show before. It's biochemical engineer Ivor Cummins, aka the Fat Emperor. How's it going, Ivor?
How you doing, Sam? Not too bad.
Fantastic! It's great to have you on the show again. I had a very very good fun on the last interview that we did with you on the cholesterol conundrum, which is quite a conundrum for some folks, but thankfully you kind of clearly and concisely helped us come to a conclusion that cholesterol isn't all that bad. It's fundamental for health. And now, in your latest lecture on YouTube, you've gone into all of the science of vitamin D. And today's interview is called the Vitamin D Debacle. So before we kind of get into everything that is vitamin D and health, tell us how you kind of got into health and fitness coming from an engineering background.
Okay, right, Sam. Well, I'll try and make it short. I've gone through it a few times. But yeah, basically around a year and a half ago or a little more, I got some routine blood tests and they showed some pretty high markers for health. Serum GGT, gamma-glutamyl transferase, it's a liver enzyme and it indicative of inflammation, and serum ferritin was high. And the cholesterol was a little bit high, but again, I only found out later that wasn't so relevant. So I approached several doctors because the first one wasn't really sure what I was to do about these markers, very vague. And then I approached another one who was a brother's friend and went through it with him. And again, he had an idea of what GGT and ferritin were about, but not really sure what to do. There was an indication that high alcohol could drive up GGT, which I discovered is true, but that wasn't my problem. And I went to a third doctor, and again, similar story. So long story short, it's like in the engineering world, if you've got a technical issue and you go to the people involved and they're not sure exactly what the implications are of the high readings or what to do to reduce them, then you've got to go and research yourself. That was effectively it. I had no choice, because within the first few days researching GGT, I discovered that high levels are linearly correlating to higher mortality, and pretty much the relationship goes all the way. So I knew there was a lot at stake, so I began to research, and I went back to my biochemistry. I joined PubMed and ResearchGate, and I began to access the actual research papers and experiments over the past 50 years. And that's where I pretty quickly came towards carbohydrate as driving up my inflammation, got into the whole cholesterol scene, the metabolic syndrome, and then I had the bug, because not only did I fix my own problem and dramatically improve all my body markers literally within weeks, which would give you a hugely improved chance of living longer, but it was also fascinating. So at that stage I couldn't stop, and I kept going, and eventually I hit D as well.
Yeah, and here we are, ready to get into vitamin D. So, because people would have seen this on TV adverts and adverts across newspapers and websites and things like that. Now fortified with vitamin D, or our milk contains vitamin D. And they kind of go into the vitamin D is what helps the bones absorb calcium and things like that. But before we kind of get into that, what exactly is vitamin D?
Okay, well, vitamin D is, and it's not actually a vitamin, so D3 is kind of a pre-hormone, and it's converted in your liver into 25-hydroxy-D, and then ultimately in your kidney it's converted into 1,25-dihydroxy, which is the active hormone, and it's very powerful, and it's involved in your bone formation and the management of calcium in your body. So it's much more important than a generic kind of vitamin where you just need a little bit of it. And apparently it came about, or was incorporated into vertebrates around 300 or 400 million years ago, because in the sea the vertebrates could access calcium all around them for bone formation. But when you move to land, you need a much more exotic system to manage calcium. You got to get it through the diet, and you got to manage it. So vitamin D is that old, And because it became part of our system so far back, my belief is that explains why it's actually connected to so many systems, not just bone health. So in the last 10 or 20 years, the science has exploded, and there are papers on pretty much so many systems that vitamin D mediates or acts on. And it allows you to tap into your DNA and transcript off proteins and enzymes, which have a whole myriad of uses. So I suppose that's the first thing. Vitamin D is not just a generic vitamin that helps with a couple of things. It's tied in implicitly with the human system. So I think that's what makes it kind of exciting. In the last 10 years, a lot of what I just said is all coming out. There's a huge amount of focus on it. And there's two extreme camps. There's one camp that believe it's massively important and the guidelines for intake are way too low and we got to go way up high. And that's kind of the slant I took. And then there's another camp saying D is overrated. Some of the trials showed it didn't have much of an effect when they supplemented, and the whole thing is overblown. And the truth is somewhere in there.
As always, as always.
Yeah. So I guess I took a pretty aggressive stance because when I learned all the science, I was very excited about the mechanisms. And as we mentioned before, there's three things for knowing something is important or getting root cause. There's associational data, like our friend Mr. Keyes, you know, where the problem tracks with a certain factor, but the factor may or may not be causing the problem. Then there's the mechanisms where you show that the factor you're interested in really has the mechanistic effect on the issue you're seeing. And that's where vitamin D has mountains of mechanisms, a lot of them proven. And then there's the experimental proof. So you bring up someone's D value and then you see that the disease rate changes. And that's the one that's still controversial. So I took a fairly aggressive stance, and a lot of the professors who spent 30 or 40 years working on this, I'd be in line with them. So Professor Hollick, Professor Heaney, Professor Hollis actually has a very interesting work on lactating mothers, which I might mention in a minute. Very, very fascinating. And a whole host of professors who are the key experts would take the view that the population, 70% are insufficient or deficient. It's a massive problem, and really we need to get the whole population up above 30 nanograms in the blood to basically tackle a whole range of inflammatory and other diseases. And that's where the battle's being played out now. Do we need to get everyone up above 30 nanograms, get everyone really sufficient in D, or do we just need them to get up around 20 and have enough for basic bone health? That's where it's at.
So that's where the argument is. So kind of where do you stand? Somewhere in the middle or kind of towards the higher end? And with that in mind, do we need to be taking supplements or can we just get it all from real food and sunshine? What's the deal?
Well, okay, the primary method would really be sunshine. So largely speaking, the theory is that our skin whitened as we move north. We have far less UVB, and it's a very narrow range of the spectrum that produces vitamin D in the skin, and it produces lots of other things as well. So it's around 290 to 315 nanometers, which is very narrow, and then the UVA goes from 315 up to 400. But there's a lot more UVA coming from the sun to Earth's surface than UVB. So ultimately, diet, it's very hard to get enough D. You effectively won't get it. If you're eating an evolutionary diet, a huge amount of fatty fish and, you know, animal organs and all that stuff, you're going to get quite a bit, you know, cod liver oil, etc. But in modern diets, it's not going to happen. I mean, there's going to be vanishingly small amounts really taken in. So sunlight would be the ideal way, healthy sun exposure, no burning, and getting that UVB that produced the D over the millennia and over evolution. But today we've got a fear of sun. So largely speaking, most people can't work out what's safe and what's not. So that's a problematic area. I personally will make sure I get sun, and I also have a lamp that came from one of the professors who specializes in D. And you get other benefits, I believe, too, with nitrous oxide production, cholesterol sulfate, and lots of other photo products. So I prefer to go the natural route. but I'm equally practical. And the simplest way for most people is just to take roughly the right amount of supplementation, and then they're covered. So the supplementation level, reasonably simple. Outside of the summer and spring where you're getting sun and your D is naturally raised, you'll get 10, 15,000 international units in half an hour in kind of midday sun. Even less if the sun is very strong or in the center of the summer. So you can get thousands and thousands of international units, very short sun exposure. So with supplementation, the rough guideline in northern latitudes when you're not getting sun in the winter, autumn, is around 3,000 or 4,000 a day. The current guidelines, however, are 400 to 600 units a day. So that's, yeah.
Almost
current guidelines are around 10 times less than you'll generally see the specialist experts guide. And that, I believe, is the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So what can we do as kind of a population level? Is it a case of kind of, you know, handing out vitamin D3 supplements, or should we put it in water, or how can that work?
Well, I'd say the supplements are the safest, cleanest route at the moment. So there's a concern about toxicity of D, but you can probably see the absurdity. If 10 or 15 minutes in strong sun will give you 10,000 plus international units, how can there be toxicity in taking a few thousand when you're getting effectively none in the winter? So if you put aside the toxicity, the D3 supplementation is very cheap. You can get on Amazon or anywhere now bottles of, say, 3,000 capsules, as in 3,000 units per capsule. And it's very inexpensive, and taking one of those daily is the simplest solution. The question is, how do you get the whole population to do that? Because currently there are those arguments on the guidelines. So in the UK the guidelines aren't even clear, and in the US it's 600. So how we translate to everyone taking a few thousand and getting their blood status up to 30 plus, it is a challenge. Because first, all the experts must align. And the Institute of Medicine in the States is saying, you know, we don't know that going up to 30 or more might not bring problems. So they're keeping really conservative. And then you have the other experts saying, well, what I'm saying. But there isn't a unified voice on this. It's still being contested. So, I mean, I did my video, which will help some people maybe understand it a bit. But that's only me. See that the really good guys like Hollick and Hollis, their YouTube videos often have very low view numbers. You know, they're quite technical and quite low views.
This is the problem, isn't it? So we kind of need to distill the information and present it in a way that is very consumable and clear and concise for people to kind of make informed decisions from there. Now, when it comes to kind of during the summer and things, should people be wearing sun cream or not wearing sun cream, and kind of, you know, being out in the sun for half an hour and then covering themselves up after that, or how should it work?
Well, the guidance is beginning to switch now to getting 20 or 30 minutes of sun, absolutely no burning, and then put on the sunscreen, because the sunscreen will block all vitamin D production, pretty much. Now, there is a complication in that the sunscreens, well, depending on the sunscreen, some of them will block the UVA higher energy, which is most of the energy from the sun, and that is felt to be the primary cause of cutaneous malignant melanoma. But you really want a sunscreen that is blocking the UVA, because if you only block the UVB, which has happened for decades previously, you'll lose the vitamin D production, which is anti-cancer. You'll lose the tanning reaction, which ultimately will help protect from the UVA also. And you'll lose the warning sign of maybe getting pink and the trigger to get you out. So you'll end up out there with the UVB shut off, not burning, but getting a whole lot of UVA pouring into under your epidermis. So I think the safest guideline is a little bit of healthy sun per day to generate the vitamin D and the other products, and then ideally use clothing for the reasons I just said about the sunscreen question. Ideally just keep out of strong sun if there's a chance of getting burnt, and use light clothing or hats and just shield that way. Would be in ways a safer way to not get too much sun. But the studies, it would appear, and I summarized some in the talk, outdoor skin cancer comes in 3 types. You've got basal and squamous carcinoma, which are skin cancers. They've got 0.5% mortality or less. I think there's 2,000 or 3,000 deaths a year in the US due to those, and they're the ones that generally you get from excessive sun. The really important skin cancer is cutaneous malignant melanoma. It causes maybe 8,000 to 10,000 deaths in the US each year, so you can see it's a 5x problem. And actually, always the studies tend to show that outdoor workers with lots of sun exposure over lifetime have lower levels of melanoma than indoor workers. So that's a repeat finding. So you've got this paradox that some of my doctor friends worldwide now say at the conferences, the dermatologists are all kind of in a quandary about this because they're not sure where to go. The more trivial skin cancers, more sun tends to drive them, but they're not so serious and they're kind of a disease of aging. The really serious melanoma that no one wants, with a 40% mortality rate, people who have long-term sun exposure have lower levels on average, but people who get burning will tend to drive melanoma. So you can see how complicated it is. So I'd say healthy sun exposure to get the vitamin D and all the stuff that we evolved to get, and tend towards using light clothing to prevent too much sun exposure or prevent burning. And that's basically what I do and the family would do. That's our approach.
Absolutely. So kind of all those linen shirts and things that people have been wearing for years on holidays is kind of a good idea, really, and kind of the sun hats and things like that. As long as you're kind of, getting that initial 20 to 30 minutes of initial sun exposure, and again, it depends on your skin tone as well. For myself, I have pretty olive skin, and kind of after a few days, I'm sometimes mistaken for a local in Spain or south of France. So, for some people, they can kind of, walk into the sun and then they end up like a lobster. So, suppose that's dependent as well, is it?
Absolutely, and thanks for reminding me, Sam. That's a huge point. There's 6 skin types, and they go from the slightest sun in your burn all the way up to obviously really dark, and the burning is the key. I mean, that's the signal. So no matter what your skin type is, an erythemal dose of sun is enough to give you pinkness 24 hours later, and everyone will have very different doses of sun that will cause them to pink or burn. So it is a personal responsibility thing. Everyone that knows how much sun they can get without actually getting burnt, and ideally aim for something like that and not go overboard. And that's the key, I would say. The supplementation then, if people really are still worried about the sun and haven't studied what we've just talked about and aren't comfortable making their own judgment, well then supplementation is the safer method. The problem with supplementation is there's still a possibility, and it's being debated, because the sun triggers so many things in your skin, not just D3, there's a question mark as to whether the D3 supplementation trials will really come out with all the benefits that are expected, because you're not recreating the evolutionary source, i.e. sun. There's no experiment or trial that's giving one group plenty of healthy sun and the other is staying indoors terrified, like a lot of people, and then watching their progress. There's only D3 trials, and it may not give everything that the sun has to give. That's the only question. There's a great book out, people want to read it, Cholesterol and the Sun, by Dr. David Grimes in the UK. And he has 50 years, he's an endocrinologist working with people and vitamin D and observing patients. And it actually explains a lot about the sun's part in our health. It sounds quackery, and a lot of people think, the sun, the science is there. It's phenomenal.
Well, it
Part of
doesn't.
our evolution.
It really doesn't surprise me because yeah, it's been a massive part of our evolution. You know,
Yeah.
it's been there since the formation of the Earth. You know, I mean, it's quite funny that you know the human body has kind of set up these warning systems to tell you by hurting you, you know, that you need to get out of the sun. You know, when you get pink and kind of you start to peel and things like that, it really hurts. So you know, you instantly cover that up, kind of naturally. So kind of nature has almost sorted it out. We've just got to try and figure out what nature's trying to tell us. Really.
Yeah, and it is complicated, and I think in the coming years it'll start getting worked out. There's an entrepreneur guy now who I think he made 100 million on some venture, and he's piling and plowing into doing very inexpensive sunrooms that people can have at home. And he believes he has the FDA on board, he has a lot of doctors, a lot of studying, and he's putting his money where his mouth is, and he reckons it's going to be bigger than the 100 million thing he did. I can't remember his name offhand. So there are various people beginning to open up this after decades of the sun being seen as pretty much all bad, which is absurd. And now we'll see it all opening up, and the subtlety of the science will start getting exposed. And there'll be a lot of anger and a lot of camps arguing with each other. You can be sure of that.
Oh, undoubtedly, undoubtedly. So just quickly before we kind of start to wrap things up, what's the deal with tanning salons and sunbeds and things like that? Are they beneficial in small amounts or just not at all?
Well, tanning salons, and I didn't really look into them much because I say I got a lamp that's specially made for UVB. And it's for vitamin D production. But I would say years ago they could have been problematic because they could have had a lot of UVA relative to the UVB. And you really can't be sure as to the quality of the machines and their spectra. So I would guess nowadays there's a lot more regulation, and probably a lot of what I've been saying, you know, is incorporated. So I would guess reputable tanning houses that have good control, proper spectrum of light would be fine. And they'll give you vitamin D and they give you a light tan. But I'd be guessing because I haven't really explored them in any depth. But I'd say fine if they represent natural sunlight or more UVB than UVA, which is the good side. I'd say there's just one other point before though we get to wrap up. One of the reasons I was quite aggressive in the D is for Debacle, and even chose the name, was some recent work by Professor Hollis, who's worked for 25 years on D and on particularly mothers and children. And there's the phenomenon that breast milk now has been effectively declared to be insufficient in D, which is a major issue. And all the experts accept this. And it occurred to me that breast milk, why would it be deficient in D3 and not in anything else? It's cool for everything else. So that's crazy, really. But he has discovered the answer, and it's because the only way he could get women's breast milk to be sufficient in D3 through their system into their breast milk was to give them 6,400 international units a day. So if you think the guidelines for women are 600, and he did a 2,000 group, which they had to cancel from the experiment because their breast milk was insufficient, so they had to cancel that segment. So 5,000 or 6,000 needed to get a woman to the level where her breast milk is sufficient in D. So that kind of proves for me, nearly beyond anything else, of what the appropriate level of intake is. You know, the level, because in evolution, now they supplement the babies because of insufficient breast milk, all of them. But in evolution, there was no supplementation. So how did the baby get it? Well, the mother was getting thousands per day at least to produce milk. So I just wanted to get that one in. I think it's people can look up Hollis on YouTube. Really good guy.
That's fascinating. That's a really important point, especially with kind of breastfeeding and things like that. Just make sure you're getting vitamin D3. Now we do have a couple of questions in regard to supplementation. First one from John Mason, who asked, throughout autumn and winter, he supplements with vitamin D3. His capsules are 10,000 international units. So he just normally takes about 3 or 4 a week. So that'd be kind of 30,000 to 40,000 international units a week. And is it kind of better to do it that way than say, is it okay to do it that way rather than say take 4,000 a day?
I'd say there's some hello John, by the way, it's a good pal of mine.
Yeah.
I'd say the D3 itself, the vitamin, before it gets converted in your liver, has a half-life of approximately a day. So after a day or so, half of it has depleted. So every day or every couple of days would be ideal. There are experiments where they gave 500,000 units once a year to elderly people, which is obviously outrageous. I know.
Wow, that's awesome. It's really interesting.
It's a story for another time, but it shows you how some of the experiments have been outrageously bad and their results are meaningless. But anyway, so a few thousand a day is what I would go for. 10,000 every 3 days is pretty much close enough given the half-life of D3. If you're going for like 50,000 every couple of weeks, the 25-hydroxy-D produced by your liver has a half-life of several weeks, and apparently it can be stored in fat. So you could say every couple of weeks taking a much bigger dose is okay because you'll convert it. But as you get bigger doses at less frequent intervals, you're just getting into a questionable territory. And there's no reason not to get the 3,000 or 4,000 daily. And you're staying exactly where evolution would have had it. So in equatorial, you'd have a constant flow of D3 vitamin into your blood. And I always go for the evolutionary ideal if one isn't sure. So that's probably what I'd say.
Absolutely. So ideally kind of take it on a daily basis, and kind of from my point of view with that, it's better to have that daily routine than kind of say doing it kind of every few days or kind of weekly, because then you know that you're going to do it, that sort of thing.
And you're keeping a stable level of D3 in your blood, and there is some data to suggest the D3 can be used directly in cells, not just through the liver. But anyway, sorry.
Awesome. That's cool, Ivor. And then last one from Colin Fulton, on the north side of the border in Ireland, asks, he just ordered some vitamin D3 last night, in fact, and is there a limit to the dose? Worried that he might be overdoing it. His tablets are actually 50,000 international units, as it's very sunny here in Belfast. So what do you recommend for Colin?
Okay, well, from leveraging the experts, and again, it's very hard to answer this question fully. You have to leverage the Endocrine Society and others to be safe. So basically, the upper limit for an average human, up to 10,000 a day, it appears, there's almost no chance of toxicity, arguably up to 30,000 a day. However, 3,000 or 4,000 a day will generally over a period bring people up to a healthy level of D3 that's evolutionary. So I would think, well, why push it? Now, there are a lot of people out there who have a belief, because D is so important, kind of go to the max. So instead of getting your blood up above 30 to say 40 in your blood, get up to 60, 70, 80 nanograms per mil. And I would rather aim for around 40, because that's the evolutionary level that's been observed generally. And a few thousand a day would be adequate for that. And you can go and get the test every few months and just see where you are. 50,000 tablets, well, maybe every 10 days or every 12 days is okay. But then we're back to your other question. I'd ideally keep my D3 at a steady level rather than big boluses.
There you go. Slow and steady wins the race, as always, usually. What other projects do you kind of have coming up as well? Other than
I had the D thing. I mentioned it was 6 months coming, but to be honest, it was only the occasional evening and bit of time at weekends. So I wanted to get it out of the way because I'd started it. So now I've moved on, and I'm actually linked in with someone who's doing an upcoming film and has done a documentary on heart disease, and basically highlighting the how exceptionally accurate the calcium scanning of the heart is. So it's a technology invented 30 years ago. It's not used nearly as widely as I think it should be, and the guy I'm connected to thinks. And there's a feature film coming out in a few months that will tell the whole story. And I've seen a preview, and it's excellent. It's called The Widowmaker. So it's a great documentary movie, and it brings you up to date on calcium scanning and how you can actually identify people with atherosclerotic heart disease. So rather than medicating like a shotgun based on these Framingham factors we talked about before, you can actually go and see who has the disease, who has not. And the test is highly predictive of heart events and could be used a lot more, I think. So I'm engaged in that kind of work at the moment.
That's fantastic, and yeah, we'll have to get who's the chap that's making it?
David Bobbitt.
Cool. So we'll have to get Dave on. That'd be cool.
Yeah. So he set up a charity, www.ihda.ie, the Irish Heart Disease Awareness, and then Widowmaker, the movie. I think there's other movies called that, but if you put in heart disease Widowmaker, you'll see the splash for the movie.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. Yep. But were there any other wise words that you'd like to leave us with before you have to go over?
Well, I can't think. I have so many things I need to say, but there's no simple one. I just say that check out the seminar, and indeed, I have lots of splash screens on the video of the seminar with links to other experts' videos, and it's great to go to those guys as well. They're 40 years at it. I'm only a while.
Absolutely fantastic. So yeah, everybody go check out Ivor's YouTube channel, where he's got the cholesterol conundrum as well as the vitamin D debacle lectures, which is kind of like a real overlook of kind of the evidence on cholesterol and vitamin D and health. And then people can check out your blog as well, which is thefatemperor.com. And is there anywhere else where people can get in touch with you?
No, I'd say that. The Fat Emperor at Gmail as well, of course.
If you want to chuck him an email, that'd be absolutely fantastic. And there's only one more thing to do, Ivan, and that's to hear us smash it out for the second time on expert interviews here on Smash the Fat. So on 3, shout "smash it out" to the camera. So 1, 2, 3.
Smash it out!
There we go. Yeah, if anybody wants to find out more about Ivor, definitely go to his website and blog, thefatemperor.com. Thanks again, Ivor, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks a lot, Sam. Delighted. Thanks.
Cheers, mate. Ta-ra.